Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 113, One False Mole and You're Dead. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maxwell and Cece are working with Margot Lang, and Fran simply has to meet her. So Fran does the logical thing and impersonates Maxwell's gardener. But as usual, Fran's scheme does not go as planned. She accidentally sprays Margot with the gardening hose, and then when Fran tries to dry her off, Fran accidentally takes Margot's trademark mole right off her face. Despite promising not to tell anyone that the mole was a fake, Fran shares this information with her mother at a doctor's office and gets overheard by gossip columnist Cindy Adams, who scraps her pre-recorded segment so that she can break this story that night. In response, Maxwell tells Fran that they can't have a relationship if he can't trust her. Fran obviously tries to repair the situation and goes to Margot with the idea of marketing Margot Lang beauty marks. This gets Margot back in Maxwell's show, but it turns out that Maxwell is no more reliable with secrets than Fran is. He blabbed about the idea, which promptly got stolen by an established beauty company. Out of guilt, Maxwell tries to assuage Fran's distress including with a proposal, which leads to significant character growth for Fran. She realizes that if she hadn't washed off Margot Lang's mole, they never would have gone into business together. Maxwell never would have blabbed, and he never would have proposed. And that is just simply not enough for her. She doesn't want a proposal out of guilt and realizes that she deserves a proposal because he can't imagine life without her. Accordingly, she lets him out of his commitment. Maxwell also achieves character growth. He realizes that he didn't actually want out of the commitment this time. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes. So we open today's episode in Maxwell's office, and we see someone we haven't seen before taking down some stuff in the office. It's apparently the gardener, Isaac, because Maxwell comes in and says,
Ernest.
Happy New Year. Oh, I thought like the for some reason, the closed captions had Isaac.
Oh, interesting. You're right. But then what Fran is wearing says Ernest, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I don't. So maybe, I mean, she had a different person's outfit on instead of Isaac. Like, anyway, the gardener.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be a pain.
Okay.
But I was just like, I know he calls her Ernest. And so it's weird to, anyway. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, and I was like, oh, that's interesting that they purposefully had Maxwell like acknowledge him prior to the gardener going out because he says thank you, goes out. And then Cece comes in with a poster. And apparently, it's a poster she had made to convince Margot to do the show Marie Antoinette. And then Cece's like, okay, now listen, when she gets here, I don't want any screw ups. And then she starts sniffing around, and Maxwell's like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm sniffing for Alberto, VO5, top ramen, anything that reeks of Nanny Fine. And Maxwell's like, well, I told you she's out of the house. And so Cece kind of gets back on track talking about how on the poster she had painted on it the trademark mole that Margot has, and she talks about how amazing to know like one bodily imperfection can make someone famous, and Niles of course says you should be known worldwide. And he also, like, has his arms kind of out when he says that. And of course, Cece does not have anything to say back to him. I think Niles leaves at this point. And Cece again addresses Maxwell and asked if he's noticed how calm the house is without Nanny Fine here. No one to get in the way or make a scene. And of course, as she's saying this, we as the audience can see through the window panes of like the back door, the French door, a struggle ensuing. where
Yep.
seemingly the gardener is like struggling with the hose with some unseen force.
Hmm.
And so Cece continues, no idiotic stunts, just to meet a movie star, you know. And then this is when Niles comes in and announces Miss Langser. And apparently Maxwell and Margot must know each other because they greet each other, with their first names. And then Maxwell introduces Cece as, his associate. And Margot's like, oh, yeah, we met at lunch. I adore her. Is she here? And Cece awkwardly is like, that's me. And then Margot promptly kind of dismisses her and goes back to talking with Maxwell. And she's talking about how she's been thinking about her co-star. She's been thinking of that delicious Lopez boy from Saved by the Bell. And um and then like Maxwell's like, what? Um, is he 18? Next to him you'll look, and then he like catches himself. Less French.
Correct.
And Margot's like, Maxwell, darling, do something with your gardener. Or do something. Your gardener is gawking at me. And of course, we pan over, and now we see Fran dressed as a gardener, just like face, like face up to the window, just looking at Margot. And
Hmm.
Maxwell, of course, is like, would you excuse me a minute? There's a wandering Jew on the terrace that needs transplanting. And so he goes outside, and we kind of hear, are you insane? What are you doing out here? And then we see Fran get on her knees and she's begging. And at this point, Cece had brought Margot to the couch, but Cece herself goes out the back, to the back terrace. And, you know, they're still kind of arguing, don't you push, we kind of hear bits and pieces. But Margot Lang is here. And somehow Fran manages to get by both Maxwell and Cece, and she closes the door in after her, but she has brought in the hose. And
Hmm.
Fran's like, oh, hello, Miss Margot Lang. And then, of course, as Maxwell and Cece are trying to come in and get to her, Fran manages to spray the hose all over Margot. And it's not just once, like it happens a couple of times
Yup.
during the ensuing chaos. And then Fran somehow has like some type of like handkerchief or something that she starts dabbing all over Margot. And so, of course, like she's not really having it and tries to get her off. But then Fran is like, oh my God, Miss Blank, your famous mole. Where is it? And then she looks down into her like little handkerchief or whatever it is she has. Oh, here it is. So,
Hmm.
as you mentioned in your summary, this is where all of the subsequent events, kind of start from, because this is when Fran manages to reveal that the famous mole is in fact fake. Do you have anything you'd like to add to this opening scene?
I do not.
Okay. Can you take us then to the kitchen?
Sure. So Niles is watching the little television and he's watching a program with Cindy Adams from New York, and she's explaining that she has the dirt for us. That a certain Park Avenue butler just signed a $3 million book deal, and here's how he did it. But then, from off screen, we hear Maxwell talking to Fran, and so Niles realizes they're coming in, and he's like, "Oh," so he like basically turns off the TV and covers it, and we see his disappointment because he wants to know how he could have made $3 million.
Yep.
But so Maxwell and Fran come in, and Maxwell says to Niles, would you excuse us, please? I'd like a word alone with Ernest, which is why I was like, it must be Ernest, but you're right. He definitely said Isaac in the first scene. So, um, and Niles comments, you had to meet her in person. My telephoto lens and parabolic dish weren't good enough for you. And he like wanders out, and Maxwell and Fran are standing in the kitchen now. And Maxwell says to her, frankly, very calmly, I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to scream. I just want to have a conversation like rational and mature adults. And she's like, with me? He's like,
Hmm.
and so they like sit down at the table. And he's like, now we both know that the most important what the most important thing in a relationship is, don't we? And she's like, forgiveness? He's like, no. And he leans towards her, trust. Trust is the most important thing. Do you realize Margot Lang has one of the most recognizable faces in the world because of that mole? Could you imagine what would happen if word got out that it were fake? And Fran's like, well, excuse me. And she starts standing up. But are you implying that I cannot keep this thing a secret? And Max is like, oh, come on, Miss Fine. The only secret safe with you is your age. Barry Sheck and a whole drum of sodium pentothal couldn't drag that out of you. And she's like, well, I find it very hurtful that you think I have nothing better to do than pass idle gossip. And that's the scene. Would you like to pick
Yep.
up at the doctor's office or add to it?
I'll pick up at the doctor's office because, of course, as soon as she says that, we cut to the waiting room at the doctor's office. Fran's there with Sylvia, and Sylvia's saying, "Who cares if that
Fakakta.
okay,
Fakakta. Yeah.
mole is fake?" And Fran's like, I was just trying to lighten up the conversation, because Fran figures Sylvia would be, like, frightened, and
Mm-hmm.
so he's like, "I'm not scared of the examination." Fran's like, "Talking about you getting weighed. Did you write down all" "Oh, you did really well. I'm proud of you." And then Fran starts looking at a magazine, and then she looks at the cover and realizes, "Oh, 1989." So it's an old edition.
Mm-hmm.
And, then she also is like, "Oh, look who's on the cover." And, again, it's Margot Lane because Sylvia says, "Again with her?" And she says rather loudly, "So Margot Lang's mole is fake. Who cares?" And Fran's like, "Ma!" And Sylvia says, "Who's going to hear? Liz Smith?" And at this, we see a lady whose back was to us kind of perk up and turn around.
Mm-hmm.
And Sylvia and Fran don't notice. Sylvia continues, "Meanwhile, I had 6 moles taken off my back. You didn't care. You didn't even send a card." And at this point, the lady who had perked up gets up, walks around, and approaches them, saying, "Excuse me, do you mind if I sit here? There's a draft." And, Fran and Sylvia let her. And Fran's like, "Oh, meanwhile, you smell delicious. What have you got on?" And the woman says, "Thank you. It's called gossip. Take mine." And so she like actually hands over the little bottle of perfume. And Fran, of course, is like, "That's very nice of you. Thanks." And Sylvia kind of cautions Fran, "Don't get too chummy. You're in a doctor's office. You never know what somebody's got." And the lady, though, strikes up a conversation with Fran. "So tell me what a gorgeous girl like you does. Act, model, what?" And and Sylvia says, "Oh, I'm just a housewife."
Mm-hmm.
And it's at this point that the nurse comes out to get Sylvia and Fran to go back. Um, and, they exchange some pleasantries to the point where, like, it's obvious the nurse knows them. And so
Mm-hmm.
the lady approaches, um, and the nurse, after Fran and Sylvia are gone, and asks, like, I think she says something along like, "She looks familiar. Uh, do you know her?" That kind of stuff. She's obviously trying to fish for information.
Clearly.
And the nurse is all too happy to be like, "Oh yeah, Broadway, producer Maxwell Sheffield. That's his nanny in 5 years, and he still hasn't proposed." Like, obviously, this nurse knows all about that
Uh-huh.
really. And so this lady immediately after getting this information makes a phone call,
She
telling,
cancels her appointment too.
yeah, yeah, she cancels her appointment. She makes a phone call and she says, "Cancel that segment. I want to film a new one. I want it on tonight." And so it's like very clear to the audience. And we kind of briefly, some may recognize, I didn't initially make the connection, with the earlier scene.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's very clear that Fran has not, kept the secret very well. Is there anything you'd like to add to that scene?
The only thing I'll mention is that Cindy says that that new segment that she wants to tape now is "You Bet It's Big." So
Yeah, and
foreshadowing.
and I will say, yeah, she does later. I think she identifies herself as Cindy when she makes the call.
Yeah,
So, obviously, Fran and Sylvia don't know, but it's Cindy Adams from what Niles was watching earlier.
correct. So I'll take us back to the house. We're in the living room,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
Fran's with some of the kids in the living room, and Fran's explaining basically what happened at the doctor's office. Well, the thing is, Ma absolutely has to lose weight, so we can't keep food in the house anymore. Here, help me scarf back some of this Godiva. And Maggie's like, but Fran, you can't control what your mother eats. She doesn't live here. And Gracie's like, but when did she move out?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, Yeah, I think one of the girls says something about how thankful she is not to have a weight problem and that she can eat anything she wants. And the other one's like, yeah, me too. Candy cake must be in our genes. And Fran's like, well, when Ma was your age, she was thinner than both of you.
Mhm.
And at that point, Cece comes in from the
Oh,
front door.
and that
Oh,
prompts them to do what?
stop eating.
Spit it out.
Yeah,
Not only stop, but they, like, spit out the candy.
yeah, that was the end of them enjoying the Godiva.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, thank you. So Cece comes in from the front door and she's shouting for Maxwell that the Gossip Channel is going to plug our Marie Antoinette musical. And I think Fran says Mazel Tov. And Cece explains that Margot is, Maxwell explains that Margot is still willing to do it despite the incident. And we just have to keep her really happy. And so we then see on TV in Los Angeles, Rob McCormick, and in New York, Cindy Adams. And Fran's like, who's that? And that we find out that's Cindy Adams, the columnist, and she introduces herself as such. And Fran's like, "Oh, I know her." And so Cindy starts explaining on the television big news from the Great White Way involving the latest from Too Handsome for Words producer Maxwell Sheffield. And Maxwell chimes in, "She's the only columnist I respect." And
Mhm.
so Cindy continues, starring in his next outing is none other than the queen of the beauty marks, Margot Lang. And Fran's like, now I know where I know her from. Cindy continues,
Mhm.
well, kiddies, I've got a little outing of my own to do. The mole is fake. And Fran starts
Mhm.
trying to leave, and Maxwell's face goes white. He opens it, his jaws on the floor. And it only gets worse as Cindy points out. And this comes straight from Maxwell Sheffield's nanny. Again, Fran had tried to
Mhm.
get out. Um, did you count all of this as one scene?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so did I. I just want to make sure. And so, she's bolted and he catches her in the kitchen and tells her to freeze and he asks her, do you hate me? Is that what this is? Are you trying to get back at me for backpedaling in our relationship? Is that what this is all about? And she's like, oh no, this is a personality disorder. And he's like, and she tries to explain, when you watch your mother fry up your Mr. Potato Head, it scars you. And he's like, you're my kryptonite. That's what you are. You're the only thing that can hurt me, not the critics, not the actors union, not the bloody IRS. And she's like, oh, he called it kryptonite. She's like, it's kryptonite. And she's like, you mean the stuff that could hurt Superman? He's like, who the hell cares what it is? And she's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Sheffield. I was just telling Mom confidence. I mean, who knew that Cindy Adams was the one that would give me this perfume? Gossip by Cindy Adams. Oh.
Yeah.
And Maxwell says to her, Miss Fine, do you remember our conversation about trust? She's like, yeah, why? He's like, you realize you and I cannot have a relationship if I can't trust you. And well, now it seems fairly obvious. I can't. And he like walks away and she's very crestfallen.
Yes. And, like, it's a very heavy moment. There's
Mm-hmm.
no, there's silence. There's no background music or, like, transition kinda thing. It's just silent and heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so we go then to the kitchen, and we have Fran, Val, Sylvia, and Yetta all around the table. And Fran's obviously in the middle of updating them. And she says, "Meanwhile, I've never seen Mr. Sheffield so upset. He was dead serious. He hates me. He reviles me. I wouldn't be surprised if he never talked to me again." Oh, this is going to set the engagement way back. So,
Mm-hmm.
despite all those like heavy um, words, she still has hope for the engagement, right?
Yep.
Uh, and Sylvia there is sitting because on the table there's like a lot of desserts. And Sylvia's like, "Has anyone noticed how I haven't touched my cake?" And he's like, "Yeah, Mom, you're doing really good. I'm so proud of you." Meanwhile, Val, did you taste these double chocolate brownies stuffed with cheesecake centers? And of course, they have it where Fran is leaning over Sylvia to give this to Val. So
Yep.
Sylvia's right in the middle. And Val's like, "Please, I'm still working on this cannoli. It's got chips." And so she offers some to Fran, again, right in front of Sylvia's face.
Mm-hmm.
And Sylvia says, "Let me have a knife." And Fran's like, "Oh, you're not going to cheat." And Sylvia says, deadpan, "For my wrist."
Yep.
Um, and then Val though chimes in that her mother joined a diet center and has lost 120 pounds, another 50, and she can start sleeping upstairs again.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. Anyway, um, Sylvia asks Yetta, "What are you digging for, Ma?" Because Yetta's been kind of digging through her bag, her purse, and Yetta explains that she's making sure she remembered her phone. Sammy's going to be calling from Florida, and she doesn't want to miss him. And at this, she pulls out like a full on landline phone,
Yep.
like one of the more old fashioned kinds.
Like a
Um,
rotary phone.
yeah, and she just like plops it onto the table. And of course, it's not connected anywhere.
Correct.
And uh, but then Fran kind of moves on and says, she can't believe what she did to poor Margot Lang. There's gotta be a way to, help Mr. Sheffield. And Val's like, "Go to her and beg her for mercy. That's what you did to Elton John and Elizabeth Taylor." And Fran's like, "Oh, and to Cher and to Bette Midler, Lamb Chop." Like, so this is like kind of our own look back at all of the shenanigans Fran has gotten up to before. And
Right.
Fran makes the comment, "Well, this would pale by comparison, really." And
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia at this point says, "Well, if no one is having more cake, I'm just going to put it away, out of sight, out of mind." And, Fran's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." So Sylvia picks up like the entire cake. It's in a dish. And she makes her way to the refrigerator. She opens the door. She slams the door and then makes a run for it with the cake.
Yep.
And Fran, "Stop her, stop her. She's got the cake." And so Fran's chasing Sylvia up the back stairwell. And Yetta turns to Val and says, "Sometimes I wonder where those two nuts came from." And Val's kind of nodding along, but then Val's also stirring her drink and it makes click like a clinking sound against the glass. And so Yetta picks up her phone and says, "Hello."
Mm-hmm.
And so Val kind of looks at Yetta like, "Really?"
Poor
And that's the
Yetta.
scene. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, no, I'm good.
Okay. Can you take
So
us to Mario's apartment?
yeah, so we cut to Margot's apartment or wherever she is, and there's a knock, doorbell rings, and she's like, "Magda, the dog." She speaks in French, saying, "Marta, abrir la puerta," or whatever. I don't speak French. And then bell rings again. Nothing's happened, so she says something even shorter in French, "Magda la puerta," and then the third time, Magda, the dog walker's back. Well, guess who the dog walker is? It turns out it's Fran. And she gets pulled in by this very large, muscular dog. And Fran's like, good boy, bad boy, bad boy. And he like pulls her like through the room into another room. And so she comes back and she's like, "Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is Boo Boo did his business. The bad news is he did it in there." And
Mm-hmm.
Margot, of course, recognizes her, calls her an assassin, And Fran's like, oh, Miss Lang, I don't blame you for being angry with me. And, you know, Margot is like, where's that, 0.45 automatic that Chuck Heston gave me? And Fran's like, oh, please just give me a minute of your time. And Margot's like, to what? To finish me off? Okay. And she starts pointing at different parts of her body. Fake, 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 fake. Now get out. And she points with her finger, and there's obviously a ring on her finger. And Fran's like, is that fake? And she's like, real. And Fran's like, oh, well, that's what fake will get you. Oh, Miss Lang, this is all my fault. Please don't take it out on Mr. Sheffield and quit his play. And Margot's like, do you really think that I'm going to show my face on a Broadway stage? I won't even leave this apartment. And Fran's like, so what are you going to do? Live in exile? Let's let the sun shine in. She starts trying to open the shades, and guess what? The window is full of paparazzi, so Fran closes them back up. This is yesterday's news. Nobody cares about that. Anyway, I have this great idea that would just turn this whole negative into a positive. Please, Miss Lang, if you'll just hear me out, I will do anything. And Samara was like, fine, clean up after the puppy, and hands Fran a big shovel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
that's the scene. Would you like to take us back to, I guess, the foyer?
Yes. So Fran's coming in through the front door at the Sheffield residence, and she's like, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, you know, I have exciting news for you." And Maxwell's like, I know. I just got off the phone with Margot. She's back on the show." And then he inquires, like, what did she do to kind of fix this situation? And Fran says, Margot swore me to secrecy. One slip of the tongue can risk it, I cannot speak to a living soul about it. And Maxwell's like, wait. Are you telling me you don't trust me? I thought we had a relationship. And Fran's like, oh, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. We've got a relationship, but only when it's convenient for you. And Maxwell kind of does like that little kind of shruggy kind of thing. And Fran's like, I can live with that.
Yeah.
And I was like, And then, anyway, Maxwell wants to know. So Fran tells him, we're going to market artificial Margot Lang beauty marks and sell it on the internet. And Maxwell kind of chuckles, oh, come on, you can tell me. And Fran's like, that's it. I thought of it all by myself. And Maxwell's like, that I believe. And Fran's like, oh, stop it. It's a very brief scene. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to the theater?
Yeah, so we're at the theater, and Fran's there obviously to see Margot. But Margot's talking to Cece, or Cece's trying to explain to Margot that, I know I don't like kids any more than you do, but it's history. Marie and Louis had 2 children. We just can't get rid of them. And Margot's like, but what about a plague? Weren't there plagues back then? And Cece's like, oh, and basically like, I'll look into it. And so Fran approaches Margot to say, hey, partner, I've got some really great marketing ideas to run by you. And Margot was like, marketing ideas? Didn't you read this morning's Wall Street Journal? And Fran's like, no, but how funny was the Wizard of Id this morning? And Margot was like, my dear, Cotty came out with a fake beauty mark. Someone stole our idea. And Fran's like, no, you mean there's a mole in our mole organization? And Margot's like, those are the breaks, darling. And Fran's like, you mean that's it? All our hopes and dreams just went down the drain? And Margot's like, oh no, just yours. I'm up for the role of succubus queen on Xena, warrior princess. And she like flutters away. Also kind of a short scene. Is there anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us back to the house?
Yeah. So we are back. I think I'm experiencing some internet problems. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So we are back at the Sheffield residence. Niles is dusting in the hallway, and Maxwell comes by, and he's holding a tray. And Niles is and he's asking Niles where Miss Fine is. And Niles is like, oh, she hasn't been out of her room all day. It's driving her crazy. She's trying to figure out who blabbed and sabotaged, her dream. And then Niles notices the tray and says, what's that? Maxwell says, soup. Niles says, for whom? Maxwell says, it's fine. Niles is like, where'd you get it? Maxwell says, I made it. And Niles immediately is like, you blabbed, didn't you? And it's very clear, yes, it was Maxwell. And he's like, oh, Niles,
Mm-hmm.
I was out at the Friars Club with Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner. They're so bloody funny. I was desperate for an amusing anecdote. And Niles is like, So you're sitting with the men who wrote the classic 2,000-year-old man routine, and you tried to wow them with the mole story? And Max is like, all right, all right, all right. Just drop it. What am I going to do about it? This was her dream, Niles. She was so excited about this cosmetics business, and I went and ruined the whole thing by opening my big mouth. Oh, there's just no way I can make this up to her. And Niles was like, well, you could propose. Max was like, oh, would you get serious, Niles? Just get off that track, would you? And finally, once in your life, come up with something I can actually use. And this is when Fran comes in. Niles leaves at this point, though, and Fran's like coming down the stairs. Oh, Mr. Sheffield, I'm so miserable. I keep trying to think who would do this to me. And Maxwell, at this point, Fran's next to Maxwell, and Maxwell turns to her and says, marry me? And
Mm-hmm.
immediately, Fran's like, it was you? You blabbed, and you think that by proposing, it's going to make up for it? Well, you thought right, baby. And she gives him a kiss. And then
Mm-hmm.
she walks to the kitchen. Now, did you consider this one scene or two?
We can do it either way.
I'm good with either. Do you want to pick up with it?
Sure. So Fran goes into the kitchen and she's happy. Niles, wait till you hear. And Niles, of course, has his spy stuff out and he's like, I heard. And Fran's like, talk about fate. I mean, if I hadn't washed off Margot Lang's mold, we never would have gone into business together. Mr. Sheffield never would have blabbed, and he never would have. He never would have. And she kind of sits down and he's like, what? She's like, Niles, who am I kidding here? I don't want a proposal from a man out of guilt. Oh God, 12 generations of fine women just rolled over. No, but that's no way for us to start our lives together. And he's like, but I don't understand. Isn't this what you've been working for? And she's like, it is, isn't it? But I want him to ask me because he can't imagine his life without me because he really needs it. I kind of think I deserve that. And Niles asks her, so you're actually going to let him out of it? She's like, yeah, I am. Boy, have I come a long way, huh? And Niles kind of hugs her, and Maxwell comes in. There you are. Come on, Niles. Why don't you crack open a bottle of champagne? Let's celebrate. And Fran's like, oh, you mean that proposal out there? I didn't take it that seriously. I just wanted to see you sweat. He's like, what? She's like, you should have seen the look on your face when I said yes. It's just about as good as that look on Ma's face when I tell her that I said no. Why don't we just forget the whole thing ever happened, huh? And like it's very obvious that she is in pain saying all of this. And she walks out.
Awkward. Yeah.
And Niles says to after Fran has left, Niles says to Maxwell, well, once again, you managed to get yourself out of it. And Max was like, yeah, only this time I'm not quite sure I really wanted to.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
again, that scene ends on a very heavy note. There's no like music or anything like that. But then we cut to the last little scene where it's Yetta, Sylvia, and Brighton in the living room. And Yetta's saying, Shmooey. I'm so proud of my little Sylvia, and she's doing so good with her diet. And Brighton's like, yeah, I'm impressed. And meanwhile, Sylvia is looking at both of them and imagining them both as chicken, like cooked chicken. And that is the episode. Is there anything to that you wanted to add?
Not to that scene, but I might have things to talk about before our shticks.
Okay, go for it.
So let me ask you, as you put it, we sort of get this like retrospective of different celebrities that Fran has did horrible things to. Do you think this is better or worse than what she did to Elton John?
So with Elton John, I'm just trying to refresh my recollection. I know it wasn't too long ago.
Yeah, so for Elton John, this was their first date. She was the yoo-hoo lady who interrupted his
Yeah.
tennis game, shouting yoo-hoo, trying to get his
Hmm.
attention. while they were on vacation.
Yeah, that's not a big deal, I don't
I agree.
think.
Although Elton John complained about it vehemently in his movie. So
But she didn't huge secret about Elton John, right?
correct. So I agree. I think this is worse. Um,
Yes.
how about Elizabeth Taylor? That's a bit longer ago. She lost Elizabeth Taylor's black pearls
Mhm.
by refusing to
Uh,
hire a bonded courier and instead taking them in a cab driven by Rosie O'Donnell. Um, and they were never seen again.
yeah. Again, to some extent, that's material stuff. Um, I don't know how rare is that.
I mean, I personally think this was worse just by virtue of the fact that, like, yeah, black diamonds could be costly, but they could be replaced. Here, if someone
Yeah,
built her entire career with,
yeah, exactly. That's what I was going for too. Is that like again, that's a material thing that was lost, whereas this is a reputation
mm-hmm,
on a very large scale.
right,
Like this is worldwide news for something that Margot's specifically known for.
correct.
Mhm,
How about, is this better or worse than what Fran did to Cher? As you may recall, this is going even further back. Cher was a
mhm,
house guest at the Sheffield family home, recuperating after surgery.
mhm.
And technically, technically, Fran did a very good job of not telling anybody Cher's identity. Val guessed it, and Val actually didn't wasn't the one who outed Cher. It was Brighton's classmate's father who Maxwell had shared the information with in the sauna.
Mhm.
So for
So
me,
again, that's not really Fran.
right. So exactly, this seems worse. Um,
Yes.
how about Bette Midler? Bette Midler, as you may recall, she was working with Maxwell and Cece on a fundraiser for the New York City Parks, I believe it was. And she basically was the auctioneer, and Fran auctioned off her services, the services of a child care professional. And so she was caring for uh, a child prodigy pianist, and she took him to Grandma Yetta's retirement home where he saw someone die. But then, and so he swore off the piano, but then Gracie used her girlish ways to get him to pick up the piano again.
Mhm. So to some extent, that it's not Fran's fault that someone passed away. Like she couldn't have predicted that, right?
Correct.
Like obviously it's not great. I would not recommend scarring children. Um, but that was not really Fran's fault, I don't think, unless you disagree. But it's not like Fran knew that was going to happen you know,
Correct. And also,
or
I mean, taking the kid to Grandma Yetta's retirement home was just basically part of Fran dragging the kid along with her on like her daily errands. Like she took him to get a manicure. Sorry, to get her
mhm.
hair done. Um, and also in the end, like the kid started playing the piano again. So I
Yeah.
still think this one's worse.
Yes. Yeah,
How about
I
lamb
agree.
chop? How about lamb chop? As you may
Okay.
recall, do you remember this one?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Uh, Chester got a hold of Lamb Chop, right?
Yep. And what did he do to lamb chop?
Oh, he totally destroyed
He
her.
did not.
Oh, wait.
It looked
Then
like he did because his little face was covered in like white whatever, and so it looked like he had eaten her. Um, but then it turns out he just dropped her into the laundry chute where Lamb Chop claimed she was almost strangled by a leopard thong bikini,
okay, so
which was
she was not
Niles'.
poisoned.
She was not destroyed.
Okay. Well, then this one's worse.
Exactly. So I feel like this whole like line of, well, you know, this really pales in comparison is just wrong.
Mhm. I agree.
I'm glad we're on the
Um,
same page. That's what I wanted to talk about.
yeah. And then I'm sure you're not surprised that I obviously am not pleased with the persistent through line of talking about weight,
Mhm.
and how they talk about it. Um,
Mhm.
especially like, was Val implying that like her dad wouldn't let her mom sleep in their room until she got even lost even more weight?
Oh, I took it as a mom was really, really overweight and was incapable of doing the stairs.
Okay. I mean, that's another way to interpret it.
Neither is great.
Nope. And again, there's such a emphasis on like the fact like Maggie and Gracie like spit out, you know, the candy. I don't know. It was like I'm sure you're not surprised.
No.
Again, it's a very 90s thing, I feel like.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, now I wanted to like ask you what your thoughts were about like Fran's dream, like
Um,
how they kept emphasizing that this was her dream, and it was like all that kind of stuff.
well, so it's interesting that you hit on that because that was something that kind of struck me as like Fran has had other dreams and Maxwell has not been supportive of those either. Like
Yeah,
when she said she wanted to be a weather girl, his comment was, "Oh, you'll be great." Like the exact same tone, patronizing tone
yeah,
that he used with Gracie. Um, he didn't think she could get on Jeopardy when that was her dream. Um he's constantly like not being supportive. And
yeah,
so like it sort of feels like this was par for the course. Like if he couldn't be support like he found a way to be unsupportive.
yeah. Well, part of it though is like in this particular episode, I feel like there's not enough buildup regarding that particular point because all we see is Fran explaining to Maxwell, and then immediately the next scene, we find out that it's not going to come to fruition. So, to some extent, and again, feel free to disagree with me, like the episode doesn't really build this up as like a high stakes thing for Fran because it goes by
Correct.
so quick. So, there's not, I don't think, as much of a punch. There's obviously the irony that Maxwell's the one who blabbed and ruined this for her. But I don't think the episode really built it up as her dream and that it's such a big kind of deal because then also like I'm thinking logistically how this would even happen. Because, obviously she's not an established, beauty company.
Mm-hmm.
Um so like what were the plans? Um Yeah, why I don't know, like, why would Margot go along with this in the first place? But Margot also seemed totally unaffected by the time we're in the theater
She
because she's very
was.
blasé about the whole thing, and she's just like, "Ah," and she seemed still fine with Fran, even though the one thing Fran was doing to get back in her good graces, like, her big idea had fallen through. Like, I don't know, like, I just felt like there wasn't as much build up. So like wasn't as impactful in some ways. Now, you're correct. It's kind of par for the course that of course anything Fran wants to do, Maxwell has not been that supportive on. Um, and obviously, unfortunately, Fran's never really gotten to follow through with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but yeah, I just kind of had the sense that they hadn't really made it sufficiently important to her.
Yeah, because
And
also, sorry. No,
no,
I
go ahead.
agree. I agree. It also, the way it sort of comes across is that the reason she has this idea is to make things better with Margot so that Margot will stay in Maxwell's show because she wants Maxwell. He is still
Yes.
her actual dream. And so I agree that it's not, there wasn't enough here to make it believable that she should be that affected by it.
Yes.
Especially considering the fact that like Margot doesn't like back out of the play
Yeah.
after like things fall through.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. So that was just kind of like, huh. Um, now obviously they did that to again show that it goes both ways and to set up that final proposal, but it just there wasn't enough leading up to it, I don't think, on
I
that
agree.
particular. So yeah, anything else you kind of want to talk about before we jump into our shticks?
I don't think so.
Okay. So favorite fashion, did you have any?
I kind of liked what Margot was wearing in her apartment. I didn't like the color.
Oh, okay, but like the very dramatic robe,
Yes.
like fluttering around.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a mood,
It,
an aesthetic.
it also had like it was a robe plus it had a matching like floor length. Was it a dress or like bodysuit, whatever it was? It was very dramatic.
Yeah, it suited her character for sure.
Yes. That was my favorite piece of fashion in the episode.
Mhm. Yeah,
How about you?
yeah, um, I was, like, fine with the, what Fran wore to the doctor's office, that brown kinda suit. It seemed very fall to me, though, like,
Hmm.
or theoretically right after New Year's, since
Right.
that's how we start the episode, but I could see that being more like a fall outfit,
Hmm.
uh, but yeah, other than that, like, again, I will just note that in the theater, Fran is again wearing one of those obvious wigs.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
short, like,
Mhm.
yeah.
And it was, like, very obvious it was a wig. Like,
Hmm.
sometimes it kind of looks more natural whenever she's wearing one of, like, the shorter looks, but this one just looked particularly, like, fake, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it did.
But yeah, shall we move on to notable New Yorkers?
There were a lot in
There
this
were a
episode.
lot. I was gonna say, like, as I was going through this, I was like, "Oh, okay." We've had some episodes here lately where it feels like we don't have that much, but this week we definitely we definitely have some.
Right?
Um, shall we just jump into it then
Sure.
with, Marie Antoinette?
So Marie Antoinette was the famed French queen of who was from Austria, and she is famously misquoted as saying, "Let them eat cake." She did not actually say that. She ultimately lost her head, literally, during the French Revolution. And
Mhm,
I just read a book in which she featured very prominently. So, fun fact: um, so she was her job was to be the queen of France and to be at the height of French fashion, which is why she wore those big ball gown skirts. I shouldn't even call them ball gowns. These huge skirts that would go like feet on either side, and her hair would be dolled up, feet in the air. Apparently, when left
mhm,
to her own devices, she preferred to wear like ship dresses, and she made the mistake of allowing herself to be painted in like a regular like peasant type dress and to allow that painting to be displayed publicly. And people got upset that it was too common for her. Um,
mm.
that's according to the book um, Off with Her Head,
Oh, interesting.
which was a very good read. It was by
Good.
Eleanor Herman. So
Okay. Did you put down the Alberto VO5
yeah,
top ramen?
an inexpensive shampoo and an inexpensive ramen noodle pack.
Mhm. Yep. Okay. Turning my the
Spago,
page of my notes. We have what?
Spago, wherever Margot said that she met Cece. That's
Oh,
Wolfgang Puck's flagship restaurant, in
okay.
Beverly Hills, which is known for its California cuisine. That's according to our friends at wolfgangpuck.com.
That delicious Lopez boy is a reference to Mario Lopez.
Yep, an American actor and television host best known for his role on Saved by the Bell. He's also appeared in film and on Broadway. That's according to our
Yep.
friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. And then she specifically mentioned Saved by the Bell,
Mhm. Which I think we've
which,
talked about.
yeah, that it's like a TV show from the 90s. Um, did you then, did you go ahead and put who it plays Margot?
I did not. And I realized that as we switched to notable New Yorkers.
Yeah. I also did not look her up, although the audience reacted when she came in.
Correct. According to our friends at IMDb, she was played by Joan Van Ark.
Okay.
Joan Van Ark is a actress and director. She is best known for her roles in Pretty the Series, The Last Dinosaur, Knots Landing, ABC After School Specials. That's again according to our friends at IMDb.com.
Okay. Is the next one you have the Barry Sheck?
No, the next I have Cindy Adams because she makes that first appearance. She's American.
Okay.
She was an American gossip columnist who wrote for the New York Post beginning in 1979. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. So
Then I
then
have
Barry Sheck.
Yeah, Barry
Okay.
Sheck, an American legal scholar who's best known for his role in O.J. Simpson's defense team. That's according also to our friends at Wikipedia.
Did you put the sodium?
I did. Sodium pentothal. That is the trademark name for sodium thiopental, which is a general anesthetic which acts quickly but only for a short time. And that's according to our friends at acs.org.
Okay. Oprah? I think
I feel like we have, but I wrote up a quick bio for her. She's an American talk show host, actress, author, television producer, and media proprietor who's best known for her talk show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, and as the most influential woman in the world. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Liz Smith, we've talked about before.
We have, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. I think we've talked about Godiva as well.
We have. Gossip is actually a perfume. But what's interesting is it is, and I quote, a sophisticated, glamorous perfume for women that was launched in 2012. And that's according to our friends at luxuryperfume.com. It does not seem to be associated with Cindy Adams.
Mm-hmm.
From my 5 minutes of research.
Yeah, nice. Gossip Channel?
I couldn't find anything for a specific thing.
Okay. The Great White Way.
Broadway.
Yep. Did you put Mr. Potato Head?
I did. A children's toy that is plastic, shaped to look like a potato, with different facial and other body parts. But I believe he originated as a kit of the different, facial expressions, body parts, etc., that you actually stuck into an actual potato that you could eat.
Okay. Kryptonite.
Superman's weakness. And of course, Superman is a superhero from the planet Krypton, whose parents launched him into space to protect him, and he was adopted and raised by the Kent family.
Did you put the IRS?
I did not, but I probably should have. It's the Internal Revenue Service. But we definitely talked about them before when Fran got audited.
Yep. Yep, we sure did back then. Again, we've already talked about all of the following because this is when they're reminiscing. Elton John, Elizabeth Taylor, Cher, Bette Midler, Lamb Chop, all previous guests.
Correct.
And all previous people we've talked about. Did you want to add anything for them?
No, I literally put spoken about them previously.
Yep. Apparently Margot got a .45 automatic from Chuck Heston.
I thought we also had spoken about Chuck Heston.
I think probably.
Yeah, we definitely did because Fran referenced at one point going for a lock of his hair.
Okay.
I think that was the episode with the garbage man. That in my mind, I always call the garbage man cometh, but I know that is not the title. It's Pishky Business.
Oh, okay. Wall Street Journal. Did you put that one?
I did. It's, and I quote, an American business economic focused international daily newspaper based in New York City. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
The Wizard of Id?
A daily comic strip featuring the goings-on in a medieval kingdom known as Id. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Cody? Cody?
I don't know. It's a beauty company that was founded in 1904. And that's according to our friends at Cody.com.
Okay. Xena Warrior Princess.
Oh, good. I'm glad you didn't ask me about Succubus Queen because I couldn't find that.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's just a character.
Yeah, which I don't think actually existed. Xena Warrior Princess was an American fantasy television series that aired from 1995 to 2001, which was known for having a strong female lead, namely Xena. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Friars Club.
A private New York City club famous for its roasts, whose members are mostly in show business. That's according to our friends also at Wikipedia.
Mel Brooks.
An American actor, comedian, filmmaker, playwright, and songwriter who has won an Emmy, a Grammy, Academy Award, and a Tony. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Carl Reiner.
He was an American actor, author, comedian, director, and screenwriter who is known for his humor. Also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. And apparently they wrote the 2,000-Year-Old Man routine.
Correct. It's a comedy sketch by Brooks and Reiner, which was first performed in the 1960s, in which Brooks plays a 2,000-year-old man. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
I did not.
Okay. So shall we move on to Yiddish Cup?
Sure. I only had 2 entries. The first is Mazel Tov. That means, as Fran put it, pip pip in Yiddish. Means congratulations, or that's how it's used. And the other one I had was Fakakta, which means fake.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Yiddish can be fun sometimes. It means exactly what it sounds. It sounds exactly like it means. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so some 90s nostalgia.
Old cards.
Yep, that's the very first thing we see in this episode. Again, Yetta's phone.
Yep.
It would definitely be a cell phone these days.
Correct. And she would actually get Sammy's call if it were a cell phone.
Exactly.
I'll point out the old televisions, the little like big old televisions that they had.
Yeah, and like if it were set today, Niles would totally be watching it on his phone, which would be easier to kind of slip away as soon as he heard Maxwell approaching.
Correct. And he also probably would be able to like pause it and come back to it.
Mm-hmm. Again, the whole like them sitting around the TV watching, the segment when everything's revealed. Like these days, first of all, I feel like nobody really sits down around a TV to watch a program like a lot. It's a lot of
live
streaming.
program. Yeah.
Yes. But second of all, that kind of news she could have broken sooner in a different format, like on some type of social media or uploading a YouTube video or whatever. So that
That's
whole like
exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it definitely they would have seen it on social media, I think, these days.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all I had. So
yeah, I mentioned earlier that just like the continuing through line of talking about weight seems very 90s as well.
Right.
But yeah. So this week we actually get to add to the kiss count. We were at 33 and we had that one. Now, the kiss between Maxwell and Fran after he proposed was not like a very deep romantic one. It was a very like seal the deal kind of enthusiastic on.
It was perfunctory.
Yes, it was. And very quick, but it counts.
So yes, it does. Absolutely.
You're now at 34.
Agreed.
The 5 seasons.
Correct. Which is clearly. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I realized though, retrospectively, we should have created a category for times Maxwell proposes.
Yeah.
It's happened quite a few times.
And he's gotten out of it every time.
Yep.
It's really annoying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I believe then we're on to future fun.
Okay, so next week, Fran and Maxwell are going to take a big step forward in their relationship, or so it seems. The title of next week's episode is Call Me Fran. And guess what? Maxwell agrees to, well, He agrees to start calling her Fran. I'll just put that out there. Um, in 2 weeks after that, we have an episode titled "The Engagement." I will not tell you what happens on that, but it is aptly named. Um,
Okay.
but of course, I don't want you to expect that just because Fran and Max will take any steps forward, that doesn't mean everything is smooth sailing. Especially at the very beginning of season 6 is absolutely not smooth sailing.
Mhm.
And I'm using the term smooth sailing because a boat is involved.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. You flagged that there were a couple different times in this episode where we've had this like really like silent, heavy moment where we have this really like silent, dark, heavy like transition.
Mhm.
That makes me think there is definitely one of those in the first, third or so of season 6, where after Fran and Maxwell get some bad news, and like you don't expect those moments because this is a comedy. It's supposed to be lighthearted and funny, but every now and then it takes you by surprise with moments like that. So
Mhm.
that's all I have for us tonight.
Okay. So then it's time to do our episode rating. As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. Again, we always have the caveat this is just for fun, it's pretty arbitrary, and we reserve the right to adjust our ratings at a later date. And this week, Debbie, you get to go first.
I know. I knew it was that I knew it was my turn to go first, and I wish I knew what I was going to say. On the one hand, um, it's sort of a silly episode for the reasons like we've talked about. Like we don't see enough development of Fran's dream or why she's as upset as she is. Um, but on the other hand, we do see real character development for on Fran's part and also somewhat on Maxwell's part. Like she realizes that she is worth more than just she deserves more than an
Mhm.
obligation. And like
And that was
that's
good to see. Like, I was like,
exactly,
"Yes."
exactly. And also on the flip side, like Maxwell realizes that, maybe I didn't want to get out of it because he's starting to realize that he does want to build a life with her. And so I
Mhm.
like that part. I think the whole mole plot line is kind of stupid. Um,
Mhm.
like every aspect of it is kind of stupid. And so I'm sort of struggling. Like I did not like this episode as much as last week or the week before. I think I liked it slightly more than Educating Fran. I didn't like it as much as A Decent Proposal, but that's probably close. So I think I'm going to give it a 4.25 and just be done with it. How about you?
Okay. So, again, uh, like you said, like the overall plot line of this was like, what? And also it's kind of frustrating to see like Fran in a public setting telling this to her mom in confidentiality. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
very obvious where that's going to go. Um, and again, not fun to see Maxwell with his double standards regarding, like,
Mm-hmm.
relationship and trust, and her at first being like, "Oh, I can live with that." It was then really nice to see her be like, "No, I deserve to be asked because he wants to, not because he feels guilty." So you're
Mm-hmm.
right, there is that character growth in this episode. Um, so again, was not a fan, as I've mentioned, that through line with the weight. Um, I think I too will put a 4.25.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Unfortunately, this season has not been um, ranked as highly as other seasons.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, yeah, because I think we've encountered throughout the season a lot of times where we're like, that doesn't quite make sense. And again, it's a sitcom. You will suspend your, disbelief, but I don't know. we've kind of seen we have seen a trend in this season, it feels like.
Hmm. Yeah, it's sort of like we're treading water. And I think some of us are fed up with treading water and would like to see us
Mhm.
move forward.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about this so many times before that because this is a sitcom, right? Because these are fictional characters, we know the tropes, we know everything like
Hmm.
that. That's where Maxwell can get away with his behavior. But in real life, red flags galore, right?
Uh-huh.
Because he can be quite mean to Fran in terms of like being
He's not a good
dismissive.
partner.
Yeah, yeah. And then when he says he's not going to yell, he's not going to scream, he's going to have a rational conversation and then immediately yells. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, so again, because we know like the tropes, we know this is the end game, right? There's
Hmm.
more um grace given towards him. Um, whereas again in real life, his actions wouldn't necessarily be acceptable. Right?
Correct. They would be completely unacceptable.
Yep.
In
Again, red
fairness,
flag
so would
galore.
hers. So would Fran's.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. That yeah, to be fair, she also because I mean, to the extent Maxwell is right that trust is an important aspect of the relationship. And given his profession and the fact that he is going to be encountering like celebrities in the future, I mean, he, there's a point where Fran does have to kind of get a hold of herself in terms of how she acts around other people, right? Because that can affect him.
Hmm.
Like, to show more maturity on that front?
More demureness.
Yes, but I
And,
mean
and I use that term, future fun little spoiler, because that is an issue. Maxwell asks her to be more demure, and it ends up with a man being dead.
oh, well, that's
So,
pretty dramatic. But yeah, so, but at the same time, Maxwell also needs to be a good partner and support Fran in her dreams, and again, not have double standards where they're only in a relationship when it's convenient for him.
hmm.
Um, and a side note too, the fact that he's just like, "Marry me," as he's holding the tray with the soup.
Hmm.
Um,
Every person's dream proposal right there.
yeah, exactly, right? Now, if it were actually, like, uh, sincere, maybe. He made soup for me when I wasn't feeling good, but no, it's a very obvious spur of the moment attempt to again
Despite his own guilt.
exactly. Yep. Anything else you wanna talk about?
I don't think so. How about you?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next time when we'll be discussing episode 114, Call Me Fran.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at a fine time nanny revisited at gmail.com. Have a great week.